right, y'all. David Taylor 2 here. DT2 Comics Chat is my Twitter handle, and we're here today for the next episode of Flash Chat. Thanks to all of you that are joining me live online, those of you that are participating in the chat on Twitter right now, Tuesday, 1 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time, and those of you that are watching the replay on the various channels that it's on, YouTube, Facebook Live. Thank you so much. As you know, if you don't understand how Flash Chat works, we review the latest episode of The Flash. So The Flash airs on Tuesday night, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. And then the reason I do the chat a week later is to give everybody a chance to watch it, because everybody doesn't watch it live. So the following Tuesday, we come on Twitter, 1 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time, and I have 12 questions. And we go through those questions, and what I do on this live stream or what I do on the podcast or the video is I answer those questions more extensively, because it's much more than I could type or say on Twitter. So that's why the podcast and the video are separate, because you get much more of my extensive response to the questions and to the episode. Okay? So let's jump right in. We're going to start with question 1. And question 1 is it just me, or did that opening fight look like test run CGI from a video game? And since when does elongated man have the strength to lift a car? Now, I was noticing some of the comments on Twitter as the episode was airing, and I was noticing that some people were talking about how cool that was, and it was such a great opening, and blah, blah, blah. And, some of it just looked straight up like a video game to me. It didn't really necessarily look like it was finished CGI even. The first thing I noticed when it came on the screen was that wasn't Ralph and Bloodwork. There wasn't elongated man and Bloodwork. I was like, well, that's obviously CGI. It's painfully obvious CGI is what I was seeing. And I was like, what in the world? So anyway, so that's the first thing. It just felt like the CGI was unfinished, number 1. Number 2, it felt like to me that they all of a sudden give elongated man enough strength to lift a car. Now, if he was trying to bounce it off of his body, if that's what they were saying, that this was a bounce off of his body or whatever, because Reed Richards can do that, Mr. Fantastic can do that, and so can Eel O'Brien, Plastic Man. But this looked like, Ralph was catching it like Superman and flipping it back. And I'm saying to myself, since when? Since when does elongated man do stuff like that? It just felt really, I was like, what? So those things jumped out at me right away with that opening sequence. So it was good that there was good continuity from the end of last episode to the beginning of this episode, because Bloodwork shows up at the end of, the prior week's episode and faces off with Ralph. So that was good that we jumped right in, but it just looked kind of like, does he have super strength now? If they were trying to convey the idea that it was just bouncing off of his body, it didn't look like that to me, okay? But that's just me. All right, let me read some of your answers. Polly says, Polly Macor, P_MACHOR says, I thought it was going to be one of those episodes with the opening scene. I didn't know elongated man could do that either. I mean, I guess there's a way. I just didn't think that was a power. I thought he was going to stretch and be inside the car personally, then drive away. And I'm going to say to Polly, yes, Reed Richards can snap things back from his body. But they had Ralph lifting and throwing that car like Superman. I was like, what the what? And the funniest thing about it in the comics is that there's always that long running debate, why does DC have both Elongated Man and Plastic Man? And they're both basically the same hero, people say, which isn't true, because Plastic Man can do things that Elongated Man can't do. Elongated Man is basically the same kind of idea as Reed Richards, the ability to stretch his body. in many different ways, or any part of his body can be stretched or elongated. Plastic Man has the ability to form anything he can think of. So anything he can think of in his mind, he can actually, kind of like silly putty, but that's old school, kind of like clay. Maybe that's better. If you were trying to mold a sculpture of anything, something that you saw in life, a dog or a tree or a car or a bus or you name it. If you wanted to make that thing out of clay and you molded it and shaped it on like a potter's wheel and you sculpted it, that's actually what Plastic Man can do with his body instantly. If he sees it or he thinks about it, he can turn himself into any shape he can think of. So that's not the same as having Stretcher Man powers, okay? So for those of you that don't read comics, that's why you always hear me talking about how you need to read the comics so you can understand better what's going on. But that's the difference between Elongated Man and Plastic Man. So at times, he can really seem redundant, but, Eel O'Brien was a crook. Plastic Man was a crook. And Ralph Dibny was and is a detective. So Eel O'Brien kind of came over to the side of the light once he got his powers. He got tired of being a gangster, okay? So they're really not the same character at all. Elongated Man has more in common with Reed Richards, just in terms of his powers, not in terms of his intelligence or origin or anything like that, okay? All right, so yeah, I definitely agree with what Polly's saying that, we thought Ralph was just gonna stick his face in the car or whatever, but. All right, let's move on to question 2. Question 2 is, can we just take a moment to acknowledge once again that Dr. Caitlin Snow has saved the life of every single member of Team Flash? Now, I don't know what Caitlin has to do. I read that funny. Can we just take a moment to acknowledge once again that Dr. Caitlin Snow has saved the life of every single member of Team Flash? I don't know what Caitlin has to do to get some respect around here, but Frost didn't know what she was doing. I'm going to talk about that later because they keep trying to have it both ways with Frost. That sometimes she has access to Caitlin's knowledge without a problem, and sometimes she doesn't, but I'm going to get to that later. But Caitlin herself, when she shows up, she knows what to do, or she understands what Ralph is going through with that, simulation with the cardiac arrest and the stuff that was going on with his body and what was going on with his cells. Caitlin knew what was going on, and she said, we're in uncharted medical territory, so they had to do some experimentation to get him back to normal. But Caitlin always knows what to do in every situation. Literally from the moment that Barry Allen gets struck by lightning and goes into that 9-month coma, if we go back to the beginning, Caitlin was there from the beginning and she knew what to do and checking his vitals and all that different kind of stuff. But there's no member of Team Flash that Dr. Snow hasn't saved their life at some point during the series. Just, she has, and she deserves some respect. Hey there everyone, David Taylor 2 here. I am so excited about the launch of the Nephilim Wars. This comic is a part of my War in Heaven series, which includes novels, coloring books, and an RPG. Nephilim are half-human, half-angel hybrids, where their dads are from heaven, but their moms are from Earth. My comic, The Nephilim Wars, is set at the end of the 30th century, and the Nephilim are breeding again, and not just humans. Yikes! Respect, she deserves her propers for that, as far as I'm concerned. So let me read some of your answers. Okay. Chris Coverfan says, I agree. See, let me refresh and see if anybody else has answered that question. Because, the reason I bring it up is because when they made the decision to have Caitlin, take a back seat or to let Frost drive, their body, which is really weird. But anyway, when they said that, I thought it was ridiculous. And the reason I thought it was ridiculous, unless Danielle just wanted Frost to have more screen time, if she enjoyed playing Frost more than Caitlin, or if it was her request, or if it was the writers, whatever. But I'm talking about in story logic, that doesn't make any sense. Because the things they need Caitlin for, they need Caitlin for. And the things they need Frost for, they need Frost for. And the one thing that's always been clear has been the difference between the two. When you're in a scenario and there's medical information involved, it's a job for Dr. Snow. How is that a question? How could that possibly be a question? Frost can't help you in those situations. And if it's a situation where the other gets meta or they require anything specifically that has to do with a changing temperature or any type of meta, where, because normally, you know, there's been actually a bunch of metas that have been radioactive or heat-based or things like that. And sometimes Frost is shown to be faster than speedsters, which I don't agree with, but we're gonna, you know, that's what they've gone with in story. She's been shown to be faster than speedsters, which shouldn't be possible. She was even faster than Black Flash because she killed him for coming after Savitar, if you remember that. So there are, you know, the one consistent thing about the Frost-Snow duality is that the situations where we need one or the other have always been clear. And now they're trying to blur that line, and I don't understand why. And now you get situations like this where Frost is kind of fumbly, kind of, you know, all thumbs, because you don't know what to do. And she knows she doesn't know what to do. So Caitlyn's decision to try to let her have a life and be in the driver's seat just seems really dangerous to Team Flash to me. She better perfect the art of quick change when it's a job for Dr. Snow, you know, as far as I'm concerned. But that's just me. If I was team leader, that's exactly the kind of thing I would say. Okay. All right, got some more answers. Team Forward says, so many people in the West Allen fandom ask why she's still on the show. There's the answer. And I'm going to say exactly right. Medical situations are a job for Caitlin Snow, period. The end. Okay. Twilight's Inferno. Twilight's, I-N-F-E-R-N, Twilight's Infern is a Twitter handle. I take a moment to acknowledge this day. I take a moment to acknowledge this every day. Laugh out loud. Without Caitlin Snow, that whole team would be dead in Central City a crater. Laugh out loud. I'm going to say, once again, exactly right. I don't even know why this is still an issue or a question. Okay. Bruce Wayne 5150 says, because she's the real star of this show. They just call it Flash because Killer Frost doesn't have the same name value to the general public. Wow. Wow. Dropped the bomb. Okay. That's really something, but you got to admit the show wouldn't be the same without Caitlin, but also Cisco. The show is not the same without Carlos, without Cisco. But Caitlin's been the beating heart of Team Flash literally from scene one. Okay? And she's always been a more interesting character than just about everybody else. Polly says, I answer to acknowledge. She really has. I love her so much. And I'm going to say what I just said, that the one thing that's always been clear is the difference between a job for Caitlin and a job for Frost. I don't even know why they're now confusing or attempting to blend the two. That puts Team Flash in danger, because it really does. Should not be fooling around with Frost when you know that Caitlin is the answer to the situation. Okay? Now, Greg Anderson Greeland says, still so tired of the split personality Frost that it's hard to care, except Frost apparently responds to Kate and Caitlin lately. And I'm going to say, yeah, I do not understand why they are attempting to merge the two. They have two completely different functions on the show. They always have. You know, and they do have two completely different functions And it doesn't make any sense, as I've been saying. It doesn't make any sense to blur that line now.
Excuse me, there is a message for you.
Of course, my phone would buzz while I'm doing flash chat. Okay. So, but that's a very interesting, Polly responded to that by saying all of this with a GIF. So that's a very interesting point of view that, you know, are we going to keep going with the split personality Frost? Are we going to keep going with the idea that Katie is Katie and Frost is Frost, but when the plot needs them to, they can become the same person, or they're sharing the same knowledge, or one of them is in the driver's seat, but they're both feeling it? You know, it's so nebulous and unclear and inconsistent from episode to episode in terms of, you know, what's going on between them. Because there are times when, like that one time, Caitlin was counseling Ralph a couple seasons ago, and they were having a conversation, and Caitlin turned into Frost and picked up, and Frost was all of a sudden was like Dr. Phil or Oprah or something, and she picked up that conversation with the knowledge of everything that Ralph had just said. So, you know, are there times that she's closer to the surface and she's listening to what Caitlin is doing? I mean, it's just so unclear. And remember, the Killer Frost is not a result of the particle accelerator explosion. She is a result of Flashpoint, because Caitlin didn't have her Frost powers before Barry did Flashpoint. But once Caitlin got her Frost powers, we eventually saw that, you know, her father had experimented on the whole family, basically, with what he was doing. But Caitlin has been frosting out since she was a little girl. And she saw herself frost out during that bike accident, remember? So I have to ask then, since they go that far back, you know, why are they still acting like they're just now discovering the relationship? Now, I know Caitlin had suppressed Frost. I get all that. But I'm saying they have all that time together. And they've had all that time together, so they should be on a different level in terms of their rapport. I guess they were avoiding each other in the brain, since they both share the same thing. And I guess maybe they were rotating, you know, on a swivel, and they weren't speaking. I don't know. They need to come up with some consistency and some real explanation as to what the nature of that relationship is, because it's all over the place now, whatever the plot requires, which is kind of common and typical, but, you know, should be better than that. Okay. Polly also says, if you blend a yin yang together, you get gray, which is what we have here, which is also true. Also very true. I'm looking for it, right. So yeah, all that is very true. So let's move on to the next question, because we have so many questions to get through. All right, question number 3, rewatch the pilot. Remember how happy and optimistic this show was, Barry believing in the impossible and all. Now it's so dark and sad. Do you miss the lighter toned early days? Now, I know a lot of people said, excuse me, I always have to clear my throat when I'm doing flash chat for some reason. I know a lot of people said that this episode was more of a throwback to that first season, and they talked a lot this episode about doing the impossible. That was kind of the catchphrase that came out of a couple people's mouths, like I believe Allegra said it and all that, and I get it. But once again, you know, Barry is facing the crisis, and he's facing the idea of being dead, and he's facing the idea of preparing the team to go on without him, and that's been his whole mantra all season long. And in the first episode, it was, see that blur, see that streak, that's me. See that yellow flash, that's me. Oh, there I am again. That's me again. And to understand that, you have to believe in the impossible. It was much lighter, okay? It was happier, it had some hope in it. And now it just feels like they're just preparing for the next thing. So that could be, you know, just my perspective on it, but let me read some of your answers. Okay, Greg Anderson, Greenland says, see, I like the Red Skies paper in the early seasons too. It was more optimistic, but that was always hanging over. Now I am so tired of hearing about the crisis. I'd be relieved when it came just so Barry would shut up about it. And I'm going to say, I'm going to say that, yes, once again, they have beaten us over the head with the main theme. There's no subtlety, and there's not even any stated hope of averting this fate, which means they're going to pull a comic book ending. And what that means, for those of you that are not familiar with a comic book ending, it means they basically write themselves into an impossible corner and there's no way out. So then you just make up something out of nowhere, like you change the law of physics, like you give a character a power that they've never shown before with no explanation as to how they got it. It just manifests at the right place in the right time. Somebody comes in that hasn't been a part of the action all along, which was, remember, that's what we were afraid they were going to do with Captain Marvel and the Avengers, somebody that hasn't earned the right to be the one to save the day. And now here they come, and now their power set and their choices and their everything is just the perfect thing you need to turn the situation around. That's a comic book ending. It's not organic in terms of the storytelling flow. It's something you just pulled, out of thin air because you didn't have any other solutions. Okay? Polly says, still on answer 3, I do miss it, but this is one of the better episodes this time. Episode 5 was falling back into the OOC and writers' issues of the last 2 or 3 seasons. And I'm going to say, yes, Grant's acting, if nothing else, was incredible this episode. And his transformation into Negative Flash, truly scary. And that's one thing I got to give this episode. I'm going to talk about it more later. But Grant brought it. Grant Gustin brought it this episode, man, and he helped us feel everything he was feeling. That part was really organic. Okay, Bruce Wayne says, yes, though this season has had lighter moments than we've seen in a long time. And I'm going to say that, very true. It at least has tried to achieve more of a balance, even though they've never recovered, I'll skip the word never, they've never recovered the greatness of season 1. And I'm a firm believer of that. I don't think they've ever gotten back to what they had in season 1. I don't know what it was. Maybe it was just lightning in a bottle, but they've never recovered from that. Okay, Terrence Robinson, TJ Future CPA says, this has probably become my brand, but I'm okay with dark as long as we're attempting to get back to lighter, as they generally do around the dinner table at certain points. If I'm going to buy world-altering or just murderous supervillains, I expect dire days. That's all true, but what gives those same villains the maximum emotional impact is when the heroes were lighter and more optimistic and not expecting the worst all the time. Now that's the difference between like the Flash and Batman. Batman is not supposed to be light. Batman is heavy. Batman is expecting the worst all the time. That's what he does. That's how Bruce trained himself, was to always have a contingency plan or 17, always be studying people and finding their weaknesses, always expecting the bottom to drop out, somebody to betray you, whatever. That's why Batman's always ready for that stuff, because he expects it. But living that way, living with that kind of mind frame would necessarily make you pessimistic and negative and cynical, okay? And that's when Dick Grayson realized he was becoming that way. And that's one of the things that spurred Grayson to break away and to become Nightwing. That was one of the things that helped Grayson transition from being Robin to becoming Nightwing, was the idea of, I'm trying to cover up that thing behind me, the idea of that he saw himself turning into another version of Bruce, and he didn't want to get that dark or that bitter or that cynical about life, because that's not really who Grayson is at his core. He has the same tragic origin as Bruce, but his response to it isn't quite the same. He's still got, a lot of fun and joy and laughing in him, and he didn't want to, for that not to be the case in his life anymore. So that being the case, Barry Allen has always been optimistic and happy and looking on the bright side and seeing the best in people and all those kinds of things. So he doesn't work as well to me if he's dark. Barry, that is. Bruce is supposed to be dark. I don't think Barry is. Okay. All right. We're going back to the Killer Frost thing. Question 4. Okay. 1 minute, she doesn't know what to do. Next scene, she's giving health summaries. Can they just make up their minds? Does Frost have access to Caitlin's knowledge or not? Okay, so we already talked about that. That, the way they painted it is just trying to have it both ways. Okay, Greg says, soapbox, she's one person. Stupid CW writer. Okay. Not a fan of duality here, clearly. I got to put a laugh emoji because Greg always states his opinions very forcefully and very clearly. That's why we're friends, because I'm the same way. So she's not changing when she changes. Okay. Polly puts an 8-ball GIF up there and says, why are you asking me this when the writers themselves don't know the answer? Let me ask my magic 8-ball. It seems to be more consistent. And the 8-ball says, yes, definitely, which is cracking me up. And I'm going to total snark in that answer. And I love it. Because that was totally, completely snarky, but I love it. Because again, see, and that's one of the things that happens with long-running shows. You can get into fatigue with the tired ideas. Some ideas are just so tired and played out. Like I'm tired of the different wills every season. That was funny the first time, and they should have stuck with Harry. But you hear me say that all the time. I think that idea is beyond played out. And this whole thing that Caitlin and Frost are struggling and sometimes have access to the information that I'm tired of that too. That's just, okay. Let's bounce down to question 5. Question 5 says, anybody think that Iris is playing a dangerous game, threatening people with incriminating photos? Now, the reason I say that's dangerous, because I know reporters and people do that in real life. But the reason I say that's dangerous here, because this is Central City. It's a city full of metas, and it's a city full of meta gangsters, meta villains, all that different kind of stuff. So it just seems like it's a dangerous game. We know that Lois Lane plays that game, but Lois Lane has Superman. Everybody knows not to mess with Lois Lane, because if you get on her wrong side, Superman's coming after you. And even before they were a couple, everybody knew that. Everybody knew that Superman had a thing for Lois. So if Lois is out there doing whatever, she's got backup. And I'm not saying that Iris doesn't have backup with the Flash, because she does, but it's not supposed to be common knowledge that they're a couple. And so I don't know, it just feels really dangerous to me. So let me see what you guys had to say. Polly says, I believe there are laws against this. This isn't good investigative reporting. It's those reporters that are so aggressively abrasive, you just cringe. And I'm going to say to her what I just said. Agree. Plus, it's Central City, a city that is full of metas, meaning Iris has no idea what she might run into when she's trying to bully people. Which again is so true. Yeah, you have no idea what's going on when anybody around you might have powers. Okay, on to question 6. What do you think about the anthropomorphic personification of the Speed Force. Is it a person, a force, an elemental substance, or a collective consciousness like the Q continuum? And I have a picture up of Barry's mom, because Barry's mom was once again the face of the Speed Force, taking on human form to talk to Barry directly, which, I have never liked that idea. I like the Speed Force better as an elemental force like lightning or, something like that, that gives its power to speedsters, but I don't really see it as sentient in the way it interacts with Barry. That doesn't feel right to me. But anyway, so let me read some of these answers. Greg says pass, not their worst idea, but close. And I'm going to say, what should it look like? Okay. Polly says, is an entity an option? In the book I'm writing, there's a physical embodiment of faith, hope, mercy, and love. I think this is the physical embodiment of the Speed Force, like the Marshmallow Man is the form of Gozer in Ghostbusters. That's a good comparison, but no, I said that's a good person. That's a good comparison, but the Speed Force has shown itself to be both source and jail, which again makes no sense to me if it's a force, not a person. So yeah, so I guess we could pass it off as an entity. The New Owl Man, spelled the New Owl M4N, says, is a Jedi. And I'm going to say, is it a clone of Palpatine? Because everything is a clone of Palpatine now. Dun, dun, dun. Don't get me started on Star Wars. Okay, I actually already did a podcast about that for Sloppy Spoilers. Don't get me started on Star Wars. Okay, Orange and White, whose handle is Scowls31, says, combination of all three. Always glad to see his mother on the show, even though she's the Speed Force. I'm going to say that just feels kind of janky to me, much like Jor-El was antagonistic towards Clark on Smallville. Okay, Jingoistic Pig says, it being Barry's mom with red hair just made me think it was comics Iris West talking to Wally as Gustin's character. Never seemed like Barry to me. And I'm going to say, yes, going back to the beginning of this show, many of us have always felt like Grant's interpretation was closer. I'm going to say much closer. It's much closer to Wally than to Barry, which is very, very true. Because the way Grant plays this version of Barry is much more like the original Ginger Wally West from the comics and much less like Barry Allen. So the thing ever since Smallville has been that the heroes have to grow into the heroes that we know, and they have to become the people they're going to be. So that's kind of been the thing, but that really hasn't been the trajectory, no pun intended, that really hasn't been the trajectory of Barry Allen on this show. Because he tends to kind of spin in circles and make the same mistakes every year. And whenever he grows, he kind of grows inorganically, kind of like by leaps. Just all of a sudden he's in a new place now, which just gets on my nerves. But anyway, so, okay. All right, let's move on to, although I'm still getting some more answers for question 6. Actually, I do want to read some of those because it's a deeper question. Greg says, why does the Speed Force need sentience? Barry is perfectly capable of making bad decisions on his own. Also true. That is true. Barry doesn't need help making bad decisions. It's kind of his stock and trade, which is kind of a shame, isn't it? Okay. So that's what everybody had to say on that. All right, jumping on to question 7. Question 7 says, Allegra proves the point I made about Camilla. Team Flash's secrets and Barry's identity are already known by too many people, unstable people even. What should they do to fix this? Because I talked about this point before when I said that basically when Cisco decided, he wanted a more stable relationship with Camilla, which I was all for, which I think is cool. He just kind of welcomed her into Team Flash and brought her into all the secrets and all the different kind of stuff. And if and when they break up, or if Camilla ever turns on them, or if Camilla ever gets captured, they're in trouble because they have a civilian with no powers that we know of so far that knows all their secrets. That's just tactically stupid, which is why I like Batman. Okay, but Allegra, was a villain, and now all of a sudden, they're trusting her, and all of a sudden she's already doing things that shows she's not really a team player. She kind of goes with whatever she feels is right. And there it is. Allegra is the Ensign Rowe of Team Flash. If you know anything about Star Trek The Next Generation, Ensign Rowe was always on her own team. She was never with Starfleet. She was never with Picard, not fully. She always did what she thought was right. And then she ends up betraying him in the end, which we all should have seen that coming. That's who Allegra is to me. So I'm going to say that. I'm going to say that. Well, no, I won't say it in response to Greenland because he said, way too late with this one, have to erase the whole world. Okay. And I'm going to say, in this case, Allegra is an ex-villain that keeps proving her only allegiance is to whatever she thinks is right, not the team or a larger cause. And I'm going to say once again that Allegra is the Ensign Rowe of Team Flash. Okay. I think I'm going to get a picture of Rowe. Download that in case people aren't familiar with her character, or they don't remember her from Star Trek The Next Generation. But if you want to understand what I'm talking about, that's totally who Allegra is. Totally and completely. She's Ensign Rowe. She's just always been doing her own thing and always only cares about her own values and is just not a team player. Not a team player in the slightest. Okay? So, yeah, there's my answer there. Okay, and let me refresh and see if we have any more answers to that question. Because I think, I think it's legit. I think this whole letting Allegra in too quickly, just like Camilla, is going to blow up in their faces. I don't see any way that it doesn't. Okay. I said again, what should they do to fix this? And Mauricio says a bullet in the head. I'm going to be like, dang, that's kind of harsh, dude. That is kind of harsh. Just take her out, just put a gun in her ear. Yikes. Yikes and yikes and yikes. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Now, let's talk about question 8. Question 8 was pretty much the heart of the episode, but it's something else that I didn't get. Again, Grant's acting, don't misunderstand what I'm saying, and Cindile too. I thought their acting was phenomenal, but I'm talking about the in-story logic of what happened. Question 8 is, I'm not quite following how Ramsey Venom, that's what I'm calling blood work, Ramsey Venom, gets a presence in Barry's head, a sentient presence that could walk around in every area of his mind and torment him. Okay? So, Greenland says that Barry keeps having to accept his fate like every week. So his villain will have any ability necessary to, one, not do that, and two, stop Barry from doing it. Huh. That's interesting. That's interesting. So once again, we are walking down the path of plot-dependent powers. Okay? Plot-dependent powers for the villain, and for everybody else too. But I'm going to put that too, and for everybody else too. But based on the powers that we've seen manifest so far, I mean, I guess taking over somebody's mind is one thing, but I don't know, this sentience that was in his head, it was like it was calculated. It was like if he was somewhere remote controlling the sentience and having him say the things that would freak Barry out the most and a whole bunch of stuff. And he kept saying, you know, this is stuff in your head. So I don't know, you know, is it like a Venom symbiote situation? Is it like a mind control? Is it like a Borg situation that once he gets control of you, he slowly overwrites or rewrites your personality and you become a part of a collective, the Bloodwork Collective? You know, once again, the same thing I started out the hour talking about. And that is that when you have these nebulous definitions of powers, when it's not clear what people can and cannot do in these situations, then it makes a lot of the in-story stuff just seem really strange because they just all of a sudden manifest with something we've never seen them do before. So I'm not saying, once again, in this case, that we haven't seen him get in people's heads, but to this extent, this was very much more like a living nightmare or a living dream, or like he was really there with Barry. And I didn't know he can do that. Does he do that to everybody's head that he gets in? You know, so I don't know. Polly said, okay, so Ramsey's blood lets him control the person infected. His blood went from Ralph to Barry, that's how. However, he shouldn't have been able to manipulate the mind since he never did before he made them mindless. Maybe that's what happens and they just showed it. I'm gonna say, that's the exact thing I just said on the live stream. Is this a Venom thing, or is this like the Borg Collective? But either way, it wasn't clear, and it should have been. Okay? Was not clear, and it should have been. All right, let me see if anybody else answered this question before we move on to the next. Okay. All right, good. So yeah, so I just wish they would take some time to work all that kind of stuff out. Okay, question 9. I'm only going to say this one time. The Flash is not supernatural. Follow what I'm saying? Okay, but I'm going to follow that up with this addendum. But I am not saying that I didn't enjoy Barry's transformation into negative Flash. What I mean more so is, do you enjoy more supernatural and less sciencey elements in these storylines? Because that actually is what I'm saying, that, you know, I know that it's just much more of a supernatural kind of thing, but, you know, but then again, you know, becoming negative Flash or whatever, maybe this is what we needed, but I do want to hear what people have to say. So again, you know, I'm not saying I didn't enjoy it. It was really, really good. Okay. Mauricio says, no, please develop. And I guess that means he doesn't understand what I'm saying. Polly says, I do not follow since I stopped watching Supernatural after season 1, a few episodes into season 2. I didn't like they stopped doing this whole urban legend thing, and it was more one brother was an angel and one a devil or something. humans can't turn into celestial beings. And okay, so I'm going to, for both of them, I'm just going to copy that tweet I just posted because that's the answer to what they're saying. Because, you know, again, it was really cool, but do we want them to keep going down this path? That's another thing that I mean. Do we want them to keep going down the path of introducing more supernatural elements to the Flash? And the reason that's so important is because if that takes over, it's going to move the center of the show. Because if you think about it, Team Flash has, you know, 95% of the time, they have to learn how to science their way out of stuff. That's what I'm trying to say. They have to learn how to science their way out of stuff. And if we move away from that, we move into more supernatural elements or more of a magic-based focus, that's going to completely change the vibe of the show. And that's what I'm saying, is that what we want? So let me say that, Teresio, more supernatural elements will completely change the vibe of the show. And is that what we want? There we go. I said that better. Last Temptation of Barry Allen, Part 1. Okay, I'm just typing in my little tagline so people can follow along. Okay, so that's all I'm saying. I'm saying that we want to push it more in that direction. So it's cool, you know, I guess, going here for this plot point, but, you know. And Chris Colfer fan is saying I don't follow because I never watched Supernatural. So yeah, I guess I just didn't word that question well. I should have worded it better. That, you know, that we need to think about if we want to use more of the supernatural elements and what that's going to mean going forward. Okay. All right. Well, again, I didn't word that well. Worded that one poorly. So let's move on to question 10. Question 10. Oh my goodness, they played heroic music. They even lingered for the pose on Team Citizen, aka Iris's Angels. Are you ready for them? So are you ready for Iris's team to be a regular thing? Iris's Angels, you know, Iris, Allegra, and Camilla, you know, because that's what it looks like they were going. They framed them all together, like Team Citizen is what they call them. So I guess they're going to have their own regular adventures inside of the episodes of Flash. And I'm going to say, hey, yes, I did. New York City King Dr. Beast 1 says, no, you didn't. And I'm saying, yes, I did, because they are setting up the adventures of this group. And so it'll be interesting to see how much, in other words, are we going to get those Team Iris adventures like every week, you know, or Team Citizen or Iris's Angels, you know, we're going to get that every week. That's what I'm saying. So that's really important. Okay, now got some more answers on the last question. Answer 9. Polly says, well, it's my genre, although I try to research science and add it into my sci-fi, but I like this episode, and although this show is based in science, I'm a firm believer in the paranormal, so I enjoyed not everything explained off, especially by Starlab Science. Okay, I'm going to say, okay, I think I worded the question poorly, because more elements of a supernatural nature will take the show in a different direction. That's all I meant. Okay, yeah, I'm just going to say, well, okay, Mauricio says what we saw looked like a supernatural possession, but basically it is based on science, or at least the science of the Flash. I like that. Okay. Okay, so that's actually a really good answer. That's a really good answer. So you're saying they did a good job of making the science feel really spooky and otherworldly. Okay. And that is a really good point, that what Mauricio is saying is true, is that it is based on the science of what we're seeing going on, but it certainly felt like an otherworldly kind of thing. So that part was really, really good in terms of us making us really feel like it, because it had a lot of jump scares and it had a lot of, it was like somewhat horror elements, you know, who's looking at you around the corner, who's behind you, who has access to your stuff. There was a lot of that. And so that even Danielle Panabaker said on her live tweet that it was different from what they normally do, which is true. But that doesn't mean it was bad. I was just, you know, trying to get other people's take on that. Now, Twilight's Inferno says, with metas, I think it's fun how they can kind of trade in both camps, depending on the powers. It adds variety, but I think and definitely hope the solution to this problem is scientific in some way, to balance out the supernatural element and ground it back into the science. Say, I gotcha. Well, what they've actually done is plant a lot of different possibilities as to how this is going to be resolved. The one they're going with isn't clear yet, because it's not. You know, you got Nash and the Eternium, you got all the work going on with the Anti-Monitor, you got these ultraviolet powers with Allegra, you've got, you know, maybe Frost can freeze stuff out of people, just all different kinds of things they have thrown out there, and, you know, some of them are MacGuffins for sure. But, okay, we're down to the last 10 minutes, so I got to get on with the rest of these questions. But so anyway, yeah. So I'm glad my peeps understood a little bit better what I meant. Okay, back to question 10, Iris's Angels. Okay, Greg says Lois Lane and Iris West have been reporters for 80 years. Linda Park too. Why is being a reporter suddenly not good enough? Because my answer is because Captain Marvel, higher, stronger, faster, that whole thing. Okay. All right, Polly says music plays a huge role in my life. With 40 years of piano under my belt, years of stage acting and performances, this music was in the wrong time. It was a little offsetting and unneeded. We don't need superhero journalists in a show with other superheroes. Like, yeah, but we've got them. It seems like they are going to be having their own regular adventures inside the show now. I guess Team Ralph wasn't enough. Okay. All right, Chris Cofer fan says, yes, I'm ready for him. So there you go. Okay. All right, question 11. Never in any incarnation I have ever seen of the Flash has he felt like a victim of his powers. He's always loved and embraced them. Do you buy this Barry as victim angle? It's question 11. And Polly says, I think for this show and this build-up, it would be what almost any one of us would think. This job oppression would really play out. Humans can only take so much. It's where our faith lies, in ourselves in which we break. We're in a higher power of which we gain strength. Very true. I loved seeing Barry as human and vulnerable and wanting to hold on to a life that was slipping away. I just didn't agree that being a Flash is a form of victimhood, because Barry never talks that way. Barry never has described his powers that way. Barry has never counted himself as a victim because of his powers. And I just felt like some of that was coming through. But I did enjoy very much seeing him saying, I just want to hold my baby. And because Barry kind of feels like his life is slipping away. And now we know, based on the ending of the episode, that his mind was slipping away as he was becoming Negative Flash. So I did enjoy that part. So don't misunderstand what I'm saying. It's just that with some of his conversations with his mom, they kind of made it sound like, you got these powers and, you got to pay the price. And, I just didn't like where they were going with it. Okay. So there's that, yeah. But I do like what Polly said about that, when we will depend on our own limits, we will eventually break, which is true. But, if we have any form of faith and, we believe in God and we believe in God being more powerful than we are, and we believe in God as an anchor, then we can definitely call on his strength to help us through, the rough times, because that's what faith is for. Okay. But yeah, so a lot of different angles on this episode. And I already said on Twitter, though, that I didn't see it the way a lot of people saw it. Because a lot of people said it was great and it was harkening back to season 1. And I didn't quite understand what they meant by that, because it didn't feel like season 1 to me. It didn't feel like season 1's optimism. It felt like season 1's great acting. And it's always good to see Michelle Harrison as Barry's mom. And it's always good to see Barry being human and vulnerable. I agree with all that. But it was still heavy, cynical, pessimistic, still feeling like his dying is inevitable. And he's just being tortured until the end. And I don't know. I just don't know if that sat well with me. Okay, Jingoistic Pig says, it felt like a lot of regression as they reveled in this before in previous seasons, but early in this season, it finally felt like he was not emotional all the time. I'm going to say, really good perspective. He finally got past the notion of being cryberry all the time, but now it seems like they brought that back, at least for this episode. I enjoyed Barry being vulnerable, but not pitiful. And I'm not saying he was necessarily pitiful. I'm saying that I don't enjoy when they write Barry Allen like he's pitiful, because he's more of a hero than that. He's more of a man than that. And I don't like it when they write him like he's not. Okay, last question. Velocity X notwithstanding, which should have given him new levels of power, the last scene shows that Barry gave in. Why? And how exactly will he push Ramsey Venom out of his system? Okay, so, and why is the goo only covering eyes, teeth, and partial emblem, says Greeland. Don't know, maybe they didn't want to spend the budget on a full Negative Flash look. Okay, so Negative Flash kind of has that black goo and that black shading and all that different stuff all over him, all over his costume, not just his teeth and his emblem and just different parts of his body. He actually has that everywhere. So, but I'm trying to imagine that effect, and his lightning bolt turns either all the way black or super dark. So I'm trying to figure out, if they're going to maybe use that effect tonight in the new episode. So Polly says, this is a conundrum. It's one of those, if you drink from the well, you have eternal life, but someone you love will lose their soul. Two options, one benefiting you at the cost of something else, such as humanity. How they will get him out of his spell, I don't know. No, that's true. They set up a true moral conundrum for Barry to have to deal with, but him becoming Negative Flash right before the crisis is that somehow going to be the thing that saves him? Okay, and maybe all of this, blood work, Ramsey venom in his system is actually going to be the thing that brings him back. I don't know how that would work, but maybe it'll work that way. Maybe they'll put it out there like that. That maybe this version of Flash has to die, because remember the monitor said Flash must die. So maybe negative Flash dies in the crisis coming up. And maybe Barry's soul goes somewhere in the Speed Force or off somewhere, and then they're going to bring Barry back, because obviously this is not the end of Barry. Took them, however many 30 years to bring him back in the comics, but this is obviously not the end of Barry Allen. But maybe if he's negative Flash, maybe he'll be a force for evil, or maybe he'll be controlled by Ramsey, or maybe he'll be kind of like a bullet that can point at the anti-monitor and he ends up dying in the process. But it's just a negative Flash version that dies. That's entirely possible. All right, well, it's 2 o'clock. That's our hour. Flash Chat is always the fastest hour alive. Thank you for tuning in on the various channels. Remember, I want you to support my comic company. I'm launching a comic company called Light War Comics. I'm going to make all my original comics. It's a lifelong dream. I've been trying to get these comics out as fast as I can. So go to my Nephilim Wars GoFundMe page, because anything you contribute there is contributing to the launching of the comic company. And I really appreciate your support in that area. So there'll be a link below this video if you're watching it on YouTube. And you can always go to my Facebook page, or you can always go to my Twitter account, DT2 Comics Chat, to find all the links for my GoFundMe and my comic company launch. All right? Thank you so much. New episode of The Flash tonight, which means I will see you same time next week for the next episode of Flash Chat. Have a great rest of your day, guys. Like, subscribe, share, and ring the bell. And enjoy.